Welcome to Healthy Conversations, sharing the knowledge, experience, stories, and the wisdom of herbalists and other natural healers, with your host, Stephen Horn. Today's guest, David Tanner. Hello and welcome to Healthy Conversations. My guest today is a longtime friend and associate, David Tanner. He's the owner and operator of Red Rock Naturals here in Utah, and we have worked together on and off for many years. And David is kind of an expert in minerals. In fact, when I first, one of the first things I did with him was when he was working with someone in the creation of a product called Aeromint, which is a colloidal mineral product with essential oils in it. I really loved that product. And since he has quite a bit of experience with that, Dave, why don't you tell us a little bit about the kind of the history of that mineral, those mineral products, and the value of them for other people? Because I found them to be very valuable myself. So,
well, thank you, Stephen. And thank you for inviting me to be a part of your show. And when you think about it, between you and myself and a former colleague and friend of ours that was involved in the project you mentioned, there's quite a bit of history behind not only minerals but herbal tincturing, alchemy, and so on. So we've had a lot of good times over the years. But maybe what we could do is just start out, and I can give your viewers just a little snapshot history about trace minerals, bringing it up and getting it current to our times. So if that's okay, I'll start there.
well, that's great. That's a great place to go start.
Okay. So in the early 1920s, there was a rancher in central Utah by the name of Tom Clark Sr. And during his day, out on the ranch, they didn't have a lot of medical help available, but he got quite sick. And it looked like he wasn't going to make it. And the few trips that he was able to make to his doctor weren't helping him. In fact, his doctor would give him a short time to live. So he was, out of answers. And one day, a good friend of his who happened to be a local Native American shaman sat down with him and he said, "Look, Tom, there are springs on your property that will heal you." And he said, "Let me take you to them." So he didn't have anything to lose. So they, of course, went to the springs and Tom started drinking the water and he healed from his ailments. So to his surprise, he figured there had to be something very magical there. So he took some of the water, and I think the first place he took him to was the University of Utah to analyze it. And they discovered that this water had over 72 trace minerals in suspension in the water. So he recognized that that was what was working to heal him of his ailment. So with further study, he finally persuaded them to bring a team of geological people down to see if they could find the source of the springs, of which they did. And they discovered that in this particular area, which actually, by the way, is very rich in coal deposits, but they discovered this unique deposit that looks a little bit like coal, but it's a 60 million year old plant-based sediment that has been under pressure and protected for all those years. And so he figured, well, if the waters from Mother Earth is crossing these barriers and then coming up in the springs and making these trace minerals available to heal them, he decided he wanted to do something about that. So over a little bit of time, they developed the first liquid trace minerals, as I mentioned, 72 occurring minerals in their water, and they started to market it. Well, over a little bit of time, he, these once it got into the marketplace, other companies got interested in the potential of these trace minerals. So I'll take a little stop point here and now go over into the science and government of how they became aware of the value of these properties. And it actually started in 1980 under the Jimmy Carter administration. And it began with a lot of the professionals in the food sciences were really concerned because they were realizing that there was a huge decrease in the nutrient value in fruits and vegetables. And they wanted to find out what that particular problem was. In fact, they did one study where it showed they took broccoli from the 1950s and broke it down into all the nutrients and the percentages and so forth. And then they took broccoli from a commercial farm in 1980 and broke it down and discovered that in order to get the same value of 1 cup of broccoli in, say, in 1950, you had to eat, I don't remember the exact figure, like 8 cups to get that same
Right.
value.
I've seen things where there was like anywhere from 10 to 15 percent more minerals in like a good organically grown
Right.
vegetable than there was in a commercially grown one. So you're talking about in to get the same mineral value out of the food today, you'd have to eat 10 or 15 times as much of that particular
Exactly.
food.
And of course, they were alarmed. So they're like, okay, what is
Right.
going on here? So, as I mentioned, some of the chief scientists under Carter's administration said, "Look, we got to discover this, and it has to do with soil." So, they did a worldwide study of soils, and at the conclusion of the study, they called it the Global 2000 report because they were projecting from 19 to the year 2 with their predictions of how fast things would continue to deplete in the soils. So they simply discovered that with the commercial farming strategies of the time, basically they were using very small amounts of minerals added back to the soils,
Well,
artificial minerals.
that all goes back to when they were first looking at this in the eight, and they were measuring the minerals in the ash of plants that had been burned. Because if you burn organic material, we'll talk about that probably later. What's left is the minerals, because most of it's oxygen, hydrogen, carbon, and nitrogen. That all burns off, and what's left is the minerals. Well, what they found is it was mostly nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium, and that came the NKP fertilizer. So they put
Yep.
those nutrients on the soil and made the crops grow better, but it wasn't replacing anything else. No magnesium, no zinc, no copper, nothing. So we've been depleting the trace mineral content of our soils for well over 100 years.
Right. And not only that, that type of invasion of artificial chemistry into the soils was actually destroying the microbiome communities whose job in the soil is to break down organic materials and to convert minerals into a small enough size that the plant roots can reach out and absorb that into the plant and utilize it the way it's intended to. So it
Right?
really,
The fungi in particular actually dissolve rock. The fungi dissolve
right,
rock and make the minerals bioavailable plant. And you put on weed killers and pesticides and all these chemicals, and it kills all of the bacteria and fungus in the soil. So that actually, even the ones they're putting on, like the phosphorus and potassium, have been declining in foods because the plants can't get them
right.
because of the sterility of the soil.
And of course, that translates into the sterility into the plants that we eat, whether it's a vegetable or a
Yep.
fruit or so on. I mean, I remember back in the day, and of course, you can see this even today. Let's say you grow an organic garden. You know this as well as anybody. You pull out a cucumber and you cut it in half, and it's just full of juice and nutrients. You go down to the store and get a commercial raised one, cut that in half, and it's full of holes and spaces, and you cannot
And
taste that
it doesn't
beautiful
taste as
aromatic
good.
taste.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Say especially tomatoes.
Yeah.
Oh, what we've done is
Yeah.
horrible. So, and all this, as you know, Stephen, comes back to the importance of having all these trace elements in the soil so the plants can utilize it. In fact, of course, once they discovered all this, then a lot more studies were built around. Okay, what can we do to replenish? Really, at that time, they didn't have very many answers. And this comes back to finding these type of deposits that Tom Clark originally found, because as we go back in history 60 million years ago, that this whole area that we're talking about was a semi-tropical zone. And the Mother Earth goes through different time shifts. And so these zones will shift on Mother Earth from time to time. And back then, with all that plant material lush, I mean, who knows the variety of plants in a 60 million year old semi-tropical zone held, I mean, a lot. So the cool thing is that once Mother Earth went through a shift, then a lot of catastrophic events happened, and all this stuff was covered and left untouched for all that time. Then, of course, really what's left over today is the carbon material with all the trace elements in it. And so that was such a unique discovery that Tom had. You know, he found a time capsule, if you will, preserving nature's very best for all that length of time. And so not only are these minerals available and put into liquid form for human consumption, but you can put this stuff back into the soils in your garden and restore all those microbiome communities and so forth. It's magic almost of what can
That
happen
is
in just a short
actually,
period.
yeah, that's one of the things I've done with them is I've taken the colloidal
Right.
minerals and I will take some like kelp emulsion or fish emulsion and add a put it in some water along with a cap full of the trace minerals
Yeah.
and then spray it on the leaves. And boy, it helps everything to grow better.
Yeah.
Very
It
much
really
so.
does. And in fact, you know, once these scientific discoveries were made, then a lot more attention was focused on just how much of a role these trace minerals play in the biological processes of the human body. And I've read research where some scientists say that the trace minerals play a role in every single biological activity in the human system. In fact,
I'm sorry to interrupt you, but part of the reason
no,
for
no,
that is
go.
because the body creates these little molecular machines out of the instruction of the DNA, like enzymes and other things, and they require minerals to operate correctly. So, because minerals are the
Exactly.
catalyst for the enzymes and these little micro machines that do everything in the body,
Right.
and so you lack the mineral, the body can make it, but it doesn't work properly because it doesn't have the right minerals to fit into that molecular structure to make it operate.
Yeah, yeah. In fact, really, not only does it affect enzymatic activities, amino acids require them to do their job. You know, it's like we're both saying, yeah, they are involved in everything. So a deficiency of that, of course, brings an imbalance to the whole biological tract in the body. And once that's out of balance, then we're, of course, a lot more susceptible to disease issues. So
Yeah,
anyway, go ahead.
I was going to say, so the bottom line here is that these trace minerals are vitally important to our health, but they are not normally found in most multivitamin and mineral supplements, which
Right.
contain macro minerals and maybe a couple of trace minerals like zinc or iron or whatever, but they don't
Right.
contain the trace minerals. So this is probably one of the biggest deficiencies that we have in our modern diets is these all these
Yeah.
various trace elements that are there, and we don't even know yet what all of them do.
That's so true. In fact, there's some pretty fun conversation we'll have a little bit later about some of the newer potentials that they're discovering with trace minerals. We'll get to that in just a little bit. Let's see. You know, I think that. Oh, yeah. The other thing that I wanted to do, just based off what you got through saying, Stephen, there are different sources that you can get trace minerals these days. And some of the popular ones, and there are some good ones, some of the popular ones are trace minerals out of salt lake bases, you know, like the Dead Sea, the Great Salt
Great
Lake,
Salt Lake.
minerals, so on. Now, those mineral sources have worked effectively, especially since people are so deficient. My own personal recommendation, however, is that I think it's a little bit better to stick with these old plant source deposits because they contain two components that are vital, not only to carry the plant's energetic imprint, but assisting with all of our biological processes. And it's called fulvic and humic acids. Now, a plant, when it's absorbing minerals and other elements out of the soils, plants are an amazing little manufacturing facility. And so it goes through their whole process, and it sets it up with all these nutrients in the right ratios and so forth. And two of those very vital parts of the plant are the fulvic and humic acids. They're kind of like the electromagnetic electrolyte of the plant. So off of these deposits that come out of these plant source bases versus the salt ones, that's maintained. And when you're pulling the trace minerals out of these salt deposits, like out of the Great Salt Lake, for instance, it's lost that plant energetic imprint because of the humic and fulvic acid are no longer there, because over time it's exposed to things that in the atmosphere, human invasion, pollutants, and so on. So I
Right.
always like to suggest somebody, you want something that has the humic and fulvic acid bases in it. I've got a little PowerPoint list, if I may just read down some of the important things in
Sure.
the role they play in the body. So the on the fulvic electrolyte side, it actually is known as the strongest electrolyte available to human biological processes. As I mentioned, they really work great together to actually bring balance to the human body. We want the system to run slightly alkaline. That's a whole nother discussion, but it really assists in that whole process. Fulvic minerals stimulate optimal metabolism by providing transport of nutrients into the cells and bio waste out of the cells. Really important factor. Fulvic minerals assist the body by efficiently utilizing what you ingest, and they extend the time that nutrients are active in the body for a fuller digestive process. The other really cool thing is, especially on the humic side of the acid base there, they're wonderful for removing toxic metal poisoning. And now the difference too, when people, this question always gets asked, my gosh, you look at the list of all the trace minerals in there, it includes things like arsenic and so
Right.
on.
Yeah, they get worried about it because
They
there's some
do.
trace amounts of heavy metals in there.
So what people need to understand is that what happens in the plant, it processes the mineral down to such a microscopic size. We often, a familiar term is colloidal, which just simply means that compound, and let's use arsenic for a second, it gets down to a small enough size and it changes its electrical properties. And it then becomes compatible to cellular use. Your body needs a teeny bit of it. Now, the larger the molecule becomes, especially with the metallic ones, then that electrical property becomes damaging to cell tissues. And so if you're taking in heavy metals, the body has to store it someplace. And it can get stored into the liver or other, it can get stored into fat tissues and so on. And once it gets there, it creates a very toxic environment that the body has trouble getting rid of. So by using the trace minerals in this colloidal size, this very, very small particle with the correct electrical charge, it will actually go in and remove the toxic ones.
I think that's a good place to end and kind of summarize. So, in other words, what we're saying is that one of the really valuable supplements you can take is a good ionic slash colloidal mineral with the fulvic and humic acids in it that is, it's basically leached out of this ancient material. You mine it, right, and then they leach the
Right.
minerals out of it, just like making a spring water, only a little more concentrated, right? And
Yes.
then I've had great benefits to my health by taking this, and I know you have too. So we wanted to make you aware of this because I think a lot of people just don't understand the value of these supplements. So, David, thank you for joining us with this issue of Healthy Conversations. If you'd like to contact David, his information will be in the link below, and we'll come back again and talk a little bit about the relationship with the minerals and the plants, because that's one of the things about herbs is that they, in order to work properly, also need all these minerals present in the herbal supplement. So look for us on our next broadcast. Thanks, David.
Great.
Hit the like button and subscribe to our channel to catch future episodes of Healthy Conversations. Help us educate others by sharing this video, and please feel free to share your own thoughts, comments, and questions below. To learn more, check out the links below.